Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me online as well? Can they hear?
Yes, Chair.
Chair, yes, but we'd hear you much better with your mask off. I think when you're speaking, it'd be okay to take it off.
Thank you. Okay, can you all hear?
Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. It's quite nice to see the ones I can see in the flesh, and hopefully soon we'll see everybody in the flesh. But it's nice to have everyone here who could come. And Haley, I'm really pleased that you're able to come, but you didn't have to. If you want to pop out at any time, you can do that, okay?
Thank you, Chair.
Right now, so the order of for tonight's meeting has been changed a little bit, but I'll explain it as we go along. So we start off with any apologies, please.
Chair,
Yeah.
thank you. I've just received apologies for lateness from Councillor Bush.
Oh, great, okay, thanks. And I don't know, anybody's heard anything of Russell? No, so we'll wait and see, or we'll put him down as possible late. Okay, so we'll move on. Thanks for that, James. Declaration of pecuniary interests? None, no different from the usual. Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting, I presume everybody's read that. Agreed, okay. Okay, anyone has anything to say? No. Okay, so that means there's no matters arising, I take it. Thank you. Okay.
Chair.
What was that? She's taken. Was there somebody who wanted to speak?
Yes,
Go ahead, please.
Chair. I attended the meeting suggestion workshop on 7th of June, but my name is not here. Can you please check?
We've noted that. Thank you. It's terrible having to look up. Right, okay. So as usual, I did like this. Dagmar, we've still kept you as number 4. So we're waiting to hear from you. If you want to stay later, you can do. If not, as usual, if you want to go, that's fine as well. Thank you so much. So if you want to start, please.
Yes, thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. I'm Dagmar Zeuner, Director of Public Health, for those who might not recognize me. So as usual, I will give you a brief overview of infections of COVID in Merton. We have a set of slides, and Stella was putting them on. I think that's happening. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Stella. So if you move me straight into the first slide. This gives you the summary message, and I'm afraid to be the messenger of not so good news, because our infection rates have been rising. This absolutely mirrors what's happening in nationally, what's happening in London, and in particular in South London. And I have to say, the slides are already out of date because the rates are rising quite steeply. So our overall 7-day rate per 100,000, you will remember that's how we monitor, is now over 100. And for this panel in particularly important is that this time our children and young people are mainly affected. So you see a number of over 170 per 100,000 in the youngsters. You will also see at the top, so the London overview, you probably remember the R value in the first and second wave, lots of talk. Any value that is above 1 means the epidemic is growing again. So that is what the situation is. Now, if you move us on, I give you a little bit more detail. This is the comparison in London, but it looks unfortunately too good now. The colors are becoming darker. So not, this hasn't been updated. So if you move us on. This is an important slide. We, on the left-hand side, we compare ourselves to other Southwest London boroughs. You will see that Merton is that line in black. This is our overall infection rate, and you can see what I mean by a steep rise. It's been hovering and it's up. The blue line is Wandsworth, so they are even steeper. And there are always some positive news. The grey one was Kingston, and you probably had heard in the news, they again had a lot of outbreaks and cases in young people in schools, but they are tailing off a little bit. On the right-hand side is what we are obviously particularly looking at. It is the impact of the rising infections, and the ones that worry us most are the impacts on hospitalization and then on the serious end, so ITU or high dependency. And you will see it is creeping up a bit in London, and we're still, jittery about it, but it hasn't steeply risen as in wave 1 and 2. So it looks as if this time it is a different pattern. If you move us on. Sorry. And the reason it is chimes very much is that obviously in the spread in the young people, you can see particularly on the right hand side, these are cases. On the left hand side, you have tests. Is what makes up most of our infections. And as we are aware, young people do not get that sick, luckily. And obviously, as you can see, it does spill into the over 18s, but generally the picture very much chimes with vaccine effectiveness, because the good news is that it hasn't tipped over into the over 60s rate, which we've seen again in the first and second wave. So it seems that vaccination is really holding it off, and in particular you need 2 doses. So the infections are sort of in the 20 age band, but understandably you will remember the vaccination was by cohort, and those in the younger cohorts have only relatively recently been vaccinated. And for the Delta variant, which you're aware is now the predominant variant, you need 2 vaccinations to be protected. If I move on and possibly then do the questions all together at the end, if that's all right. I see some questions popping in. For Merton, obviously, our eye is always on the east-west difference. And we had initially some consideration and concerns that there was a particular rise in the east, but you will now see that it's the youngsters in the west that at the moment are leading, but the graphs cross over, so that would be the red dotted line. And if you move us on. So this is important, as I alluded to, what is our best protection, and tool in our toolbox now, it is vaccination. This shows you how many people in the different cohorts are vaccinated with 1 dose, with 2 doses, and how many are unvaccinated. You see the green, the yellow, and the grey bars. And you will be aware, you probably have heard, that there is a national challenge now because the step 4 in terms of opening up society was delayed a month, that month will be used to really push vaccination. And it is led by our NHS partners, but we absolutely support. It's called the vaccination sprint. And so it's a big task to vaccinate the outstanding unvaccinated individuals. And on the right-hand side, we've always taken vaccine equity really seriously. So making the vaccine accessible and acceptable to as many people as possible. I don't like the term hesitance, so I phrase it differently. And we're particularly keeping an eye out on differentials amongst our ethnic groups. And there is some good evidence emerging that at the beginning of our vaccination program, we had big gaps between the general population and our ethnic groups, and these gaps are closing. If you move us on. Oh yeah, so the next bit, oh, one other thing, I'm sorry, it's a little bit disjointed, that set of slides. Another tool that we have and that you have all been promoted, and I ask you to continue to promote, is the testing in schools. But you can see that school testing had a peak when it was new and shiny in March, and then it's starting to fizzle out. And one can understand, a number of you are parents, so having these sets of test kits everywhere in the house, on the windowsill, on the kitchen table, and then you postpone doing it, it is an understandable psychology, but it doesn't make much sense with increasing rates amongst young people and outbreaks in schools. So whatever is in your gift to promote using the LFTs, please can I ask to support that. If you move us on. And then, as always, I'll give you a little bit of an update on the general school situation, because obviously, from the infection COVID point of view, we want to keep the schools safe, but also we must keep education going. So there is, in a way, good news. All the schools are open, and generally attendance has been holding up. It is fair to say more recently, with more outbreaks in schools and the subsequent self-isolation of quite large bubbles, that it starts now to impinge on attendance. But no schools have been closed. What is also difficult, staff, when they get on their NHS app, a ping that there have been a close contact, because obviously they are now traveling, they might go out, they have to self-isolate, even if they have both vaccinations. That is at the moment still the policy, but under review. So that starts to put some pressure on schools. And obviously, again, you're very much in contact. For parents, it can be really taxing to have to stay at home because their kid yet again finds himself or herself in a bubble, in contact with somebody positive, and has to stay at home. And then parents have to consequently stay at home for childcare, etc. So not to underestimate the challenge that we have in schools, but I also have to say it's really great collaboration. Hat off for our head teachers, school staff, and the parents and the pupils, how they keep it all going. So I think if you move me on. And then this is just finally, I've already touched on it, the testing overview. So it's mainly, as you are aware, home testing now, and just reiterating, if there is a positive result from the LFT, from the lateral flow test, that it needs to be followed up by the PCR test. And so in secondary schools, the pupils test, but in primary schools, the staff. And we always encourage the whole household, the parents, to also test. I think that's me done. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Can I just say something first, please? I don't want everyone to start asking questions all at once. So because we're divided, probably the first couple of questions can come from the Zoom. And but if it's at all possible, if we have questions in 3, and can you please not talk over anyone, and don't start putting your hands up until somebody's finished. Thank you. So if we can have the first couple from the screen, as I call it, please. Thank you. So who are they now? Can you tell, can you put your, oh, okay, Haley. Anyone else? No, okay, so two more. Anybody else want to ask question? No. Okay, Mansell and Haley, and no one else. So if we go ahead with those, please. Thank you.
Shall I start, Chair? I'm just going to
Yes,
ask.
Haley, you
Yes,
can.
okay, great.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Dagmar, I think you know what one of my questions is going to be, but I've got two questions for you. Second of all, across the borough, we're actually promoting that adults do come forward for their second vaccination as a walk-in, but still there is no availability of Moderna for that second vaccination. So when will that become available? Because clearly the messaging is to get vaccinated if you're past the 8 weeks window, and a lot of people who actually pretty much quite a lot of people who actually were vaccinated at AFC Wimbledon Stadium, which was a mass vaccination site, had Moderna, and their vaccination isn't available to them. I know I asked you that last week, so hopefully you got an answer for me. And also, I'm aware that there has been mass testing. I know in particular, Kingston Council requested every single school for every pupil and their families to PCR test last week. And surely, and obviously people don't necessarily live in the borough where they go to school at. And I'm wondering, because of that mass testing, if that's why we're exponentially seeing the cases rising. Thank you, Dagmar, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Haley. Mansoor, can you give your question, please?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Dagmar, for the report. I've got a question. In view of the rising rates, what extra precautions Morton have taken for the youngsters' protection? Thank you, please.
So if I start, Haley, yes, the Moderna issue, the second dose is very much live. As you are aware, the NHS leads on that. So I've sent the question up the food chain. We had a discussion yesterday, particularly with our primary care colleagues who run the operations, the local operations. And they haven't received any of the Moderna, and they haven't for their vaccination, not used the Moderna. So I've sent it up higher up the food chain to those who are responsible to provide the supply for the mass vaccination sites. So it has been logged. So I will follow it up again, but I haven't got an answer for that. I think it's a very fair question, but hands up, that's the situation. In terms of the so-called mass testing in Kingston, absolutely. Kingston was on the verge of being called an enhanced support area. You will remember that was an attempt to curb some of the infections, and Hounslow in London ended up to be an enhanced support area. Nationally, that concept has gone a little bit quiet because the Delta variant is now everywhere, and there is simply a question that the PCR testing of everybody is not really justified or helping. So there's the slight change now to say what is our very best and most effective way to deal with this current rise, and it is absolutely all hands on deck for vaccination. So what we have consequently done in Merton, as you're aware, we had quite a large outbreak in St. Mark's Academy, so over 55. We've done a very targeted approach, and actually we had a mobile testing unit, but we haven't opened it up to everybody. We have really called people in, and it was really successful, and DHSC has actually congratulated us because we could focus the testing on the people that could benefit most, rather than not necessarily on those, but on the worried well. So all in all, I think we have probably found quite a sweet spot there. And then Mansoor, so the tools that we use to respond to the infection rise in our young people are in a way the same that we have always done. Our toolbox isn't exactly overflowing. So as we said, testing, and it is the regular testing when you haven't got any symptoms, very, very important to keep pushing. Anybody who has symptoms must take a PCR test and must not even come to school. Now, that is also quite an important message, because the symptoms that the Delta variant sometimes causes aren't quite as clear as previously stated. Yeah, so, and because hay fever is around and asthma is around and the pollen count is high, so people often say, oh yeah, I'm coughing a bit, but you know, not to worry. So push anybody that has a cough. It could be asthma, they are right, but if in doubt at all, you take a PCR test. So it requires reminding. And then, as I said, very importantly, still wearing the face coverings where required. Obviously, in schools, with the interference of education, that has been reduced, but outside on public transport, it is still required. So reminder that that's still all on. And then the vaccination. And we are particularly working with schools and our young inspectors and the youth parliament to promote amongst the younger people the vaccination. That's I think me done.
Thanks. Thank you. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Anyone else? No. Can I ask a question then, please? There are some schools near to where I live near Pollard's Hill. And when the young people come out, they're not in any bubble, they're in a cluster, all like the good times, call it that. And so how do we monitor and ensure that they go home rather than stay in clusters outside? What work are we doing? I know that's probably to do with schools as well, but these are academies. So we need to, I'm just wondering how we're going to maintain some sort of distancing, because they're not taking any notice.
No, I think you have observed quite rightly. I mean, when the weather was nice, the social distancing has absolutely reduced. Human beings are human beings. So I think we need to be proportionate. We need to remember that outside, the risk of transmission is much less. So we are now in the summer period, so push them out and let them socialize outside. That is already better. If for whatever reason it has to be inside, and that applies to schools, there are clear guidance around ventilation. Windows open, doors open, make the air move. Stagnant air is not a good idea. And then I think peer-to-peer works quite well. I mean, a number of us are parents. Preaching often doesn't do the trick, but peer-to-peer, understanding there is some type of civic duty, understanding that we want a summer, that we want to open up, is now probably a frame that works better than the sort of punitive frame, or a frame that says, oh, you could get very sick, because they absolutely know that in a way, fortunately, the illness for themselves isn't that bad. Yeah, so I haven't got a recipe up my sleeve, but we've got a lot of educationalists amongst us as well, who probably have some other ideas up their sleeve.
Thank you very much. We will continue that with the rest of the program later on then. Thank you. So Dagmar, if you feel like leaving, you may do that. But if you really want to stay with us, especially now that we're in an old environment, you're quite welcome.
Thank you so much. I will give it a miss, but wish you a good evening. Thank you.
And thank you. Have a good evening. Right, okay. So the program we've changed a bit. So department update report and performance monitoring, they will go one after the other. So department update, I think that's going to be Jane. We have to keep saying it.
Thank you, Chair. So just wanted to do a couple of things. Wanted to first of all introduce the panel to our two interim assistant directors who are both with us this evening. So Nick Wilson, who's the interim AD for Education and Early Help, and Sue Myers, who's the interim AD for Children's Social Care and Youth Inclusion. And they're here with me this evening and will be able to answer some of your questions, hopefully. So we're all a new team in our new roles, so we will do our very best to answer everything that we can. So there's just a couple of other things that I thought it would be good to update the panel on. This are just updates since we finished the report. So we have appointed a new independent chair to the Merton Safeguarding Children Partnership. Aileen Buckton, who is also the chair of the Adult Safeguarding Partnership. So really pleased with that appointment, and think it will also be really good in terms of looking at some work across the two safeguarding partnerships. Also to let you know that this afternoon we completed the shortlisting for the permanent assistant director posts, and had a good field for that. So those interviews are the final interviews are taking place in the week beginning the 5th of July. So obviously keep you updated as that process progresses. So you will have picked up from the report. The report is structured in a slightly different way than it has been previously. Very much wanting to give a flavour across the whole directorate about how we are sort of working together. So a differently structured report that hopefully you found helpful. And you will have noted from that we're very busy at the front doors, both for children's social care and for our children with special education needs and disabilities, and right throughout the system. And so we're supporting staff to manage those pressures at the moment, and expecting those pressures to be with us for a little while, as obviously we're responding to the previous lockdowns, but also the increased if you like, infection rate and things that are happening at the moment. So it continues to be an ongoing challenge in terms of managing that, both within schools and within families that need our help and support. So I'll stop there and see if there's any questions.
Can I just ask before we go any further? I keep hearing phones ringing. So if you've got phones on anywhere, can you please switch them off? Because it's disturbing, really. Okay, thanks. And Haley, just 1 minute. I will say this again, but thanks to all the new faces that you've just mentioned and people. And we welcome you, because we do need support for everyone, including the staff who've been working so really hard. So if you're there to help, it would be lovely. And Haley, you want to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And Chair, just so you know, I can't hear any phones ringing, so it must be in the council chamber that somebody's got the phone on, because otherwise we'd hear it on the Zoom call. Jane, a very quick question for you. I understand from talking to some heads of schools, there's been a delay in them receiving their 3-year budget figures in order to be able to do their forecasting and submit their financials into council. I'm just wondering if you're aware and know the reason for that delay.
Yes, I mean, and Nick, you may have picked up more in the sort of conversations with head teachers. So there was a delay in doing that. It's been quite complicated, I think, in terms of all of the late arrivals of budgets from central government, and then actually sort of planning those all out. So there has been some delay. We are aware that that's the case, and are working with schools to support them in terms of doing that sort of budget planning yes, it is unfortunately, it has been the case of the delay. I don't know, Nick, if you got any more feedback from schools about how they're managing that.
Yeah, the initial feedback was a delay, but we've been working to get those budgets in place. And also, it's a complicated budget round at the moment, mainly because we're not clear about what the spend or the end of year is in many schools. And we've been working with the special schools on their 3-year budgets as well, but we're focusing on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. James, yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Director for your report. I'm sorry I can't really look at you and my notes at the same time, so I apologise. But welcome to the new team members. And Chair, as I've said before, my comments should 100% be seen in the context of the environment we're living in at the moment. The Director and her team, including 2 new team members, obviously have a huge amount on their plate at the moment. It's very challenging, and I completely understand that. And there's a lot of really good stuff in this report, including particularly in schools. I've noticed about school communication, and something that Merton seems to be really good at is putting in place structures and teams at the right time when there's a crisis or a problem. So I want to commend the Director on that. But unfortunately, part of our role is to hold officers as well as cabinet members to account. So, Chair, I just wanted to ask, under 2.3, there's a reference to a large-scale consultation for the proposed restructure of the Children's Social Care and Youth Inclusion Division. I wasn't aware of that. Other members of this panel may be, but large-scale consultation. I'm just wondering when the results of this were going to come to this panel, whether we were going to be consulted. And I appreciate I might be about to be told that we have been, but it seems a pretty major piece of work that I confess I was not aware of. And my other question was particularly was under supporting vulnerable children. So the first question was 2.3. Under supporting vulnerable children, there's reference in 2.6 to lockdown has had an adverse impact on family relationships, which sadly is inevitable, and one of the many dreadful side effects of this horrific period we're living through. But 2.11c talks about establishment of temporary additional staff or development of proposals to establish temporary additional staff in the targeted early help team, recognizing that the Director is new to post and absolutely, Chair, recognizing all the many challenges. I just wanted to flag that and say to the Director and the cabinet member, are you both concerned that sort of thing is only happening now because it seems critical given the environment we're living in? Would it have been better to have seen that happen a few months ago? But Chair, I know I keep saying it's because I hate always being critical, but I am aware of all the challenges. Thank you, Chair.
Any more questions before we move on? Yeah, okay. 2 seconds. Nick Draper, please.
Cheers. Thank you very much, Chair. 3-year budgets were mentioned. I'm asking this question more as a governor than anything else. I've been dealing with 3-year budgets for many years, and they never make any sense. They're always changed because the government changes its budgets year on year, and yet governors, schools, treasurers spend an awful lot of time just trying to make them work. What exactly is the point of them?
Could those be answered first, please, and Omar next? Okay.
Okay, so I'll start off and pick up. So I'll pick up some of James. So Councillor Holmes, it has been mentioned, the restructure over a number of the meetings. So it has been planned for quite some time, and it is across the Children's Social Care and Youth Inclusion Division. So we have finished the consultation with staff. So it's not a restructure that is designed to find any savings. It's actually a restructure that is about how we propose to have a a better career pathway for our social workers and look at how we configure our teams in a more effective way. So I will pass over to Sue to update a little bit on where we're up with that process. The consultation's finished and we're now spending some time looking at all the feedback that we've had. So Sue, do you want to come in on that, and then I'll go back to the early help team?
Okay. Hello, everyone. So I've been spending the last 2 weeks really speaking to staff now and getting to understand some of the issues in the restructure. Over the next couple of weeks, we'll be addressing some of the issues that they've pointed out to us and listening very carefully to some of the things they pointed out. The feedback that I've been giving to Jane and other staff along the way is it feels like around about 80% of the plan we have right. There's 20% of it that still needs some final finishing touches and some questions being answered. So I'm doing a briefing for staff every Friday to keep them abreast of progress and to also answer any of their queries along the way. We have an action plan with decision-making points along the way with a date to go live the first week of September. So we're hoping that everybody will be in place by the first week of September and our systems will be there to support us too. There's a huge amount of support for the changes that we're making to the structures, etc. in Merton. I think that having a social work academy is a massive bonus in the climate of being very, well, it's a very competitive market out there for skilled social workers. So to be able to grow your own, have students come on placements with us, give a chance for people to go into apprenticeships and stay with us and learn the way that we want people to practice right from the beginning. And then they stay and commit to Merton for a while is a brilliant way forward. And as Jane said, having that career pathway for social workers. There's a few issues that really need to be considered very carefully, such as how we have our support services and where it's not really so much about what we've got, but where those services sit. We're hoping that by the end of this week, we'll have a definitive way forward and plan that we can share with you all. I've been meeting with the elected member for Children's Social Care, Eleanor, and updating her on the progress. I will be meeting with her every 2 weeks, and I'm sure that she will be willing to bring any questions that you have about the restructure, and I can offer written feedback as well and keep you up to date with the progress that we're making. But it is a huge piece of work, but I think it will reap the benefits when we see the teams in the right place and be able to offer more effective services for children. I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any about the restructure.
I think James might be happy. I just want to know if when you say restructuring, we were just talking about departmental situation, where just the team meeting and discussing what was needed and who was best for those positions. And it's just a turn of phrase why it sounds as if it's a consultation without us being involved.
Right. Okay. So the consultation at the moment is to talk to staff about the changes for them. So we will be asking some staff to change their roles slightly. Some of the job descriptions will have additional responsibilities in there. So we're at that stage. Once we've agreed all of that and we know where everybody's going, then we'll bring the proposal to you for your sign off. I'm happy to send around the decision-making plans, which show when we will be coming back to you for final sign-off, etc., etc. This is just the consultation is consulting staff and the unions about some of the changes that will mean for staff on the ground.
Thank you. Is there a time scale?
Yes, the timescale is we'll go live in September, but there will be decision-making points along the way. So we're going to try and have a final map of that structure by the end of this week, which we can then share with you and get your feedback. I'm more than happy to spend time with small groups of you or one-to-one to go through all of it and to ask any questions once we've got that finalised. We're just tweaking everything at the moment and making those final changes. This is only my second week in post.
Yeah.
So I have been spending that time really trying to spend time with staff and get their feedback and really consider some of the things that they've asked of us and some of the questions and queries that they've had. But as soon as we have that definitive plan, I will make sure that you are
we will.
updated.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you very much. James, do you want to add anything?
Chair, thank you. Just very, very briefly, thank you to the Assistant Director for her briefing and the detail, and to the Director for telling me so gently how wrong I was. But once a year, at least once a year, I would say something very foolish. So tonight was the night. I should have known better than to launch into something without being fully aware of my ground. But I just wanted to make the observation that that I do think is important, given the size of the piece of work. I know that there was reference to it at the end of the Assistant Director's briefing, but I do think it's important this panel gets to review the structure before it's put in place, even if that has to be done by email rather than a formal meeting. Thank you, Chair. And I would hope, Chair, that you and others support that point, because it's clearly a big and important piece of work. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree with that. Was there somebody who wanted to speak before Omar on this topic? Oh, yes.
Also, I have a second part of my
that's coming
question as
next.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want me to go, Chair, to answer those bits? I mean, I think we need to be clear, and the panel needs to be reassured. This reorganisation is not stopping delivering what we're delivering. It's not. It's just about how we organise our teams to deliver the all the statutory work that we're doing. So it's not. We won't be. We're not going to come back and say we're not delivering things. So in that sense, it's how we structure our team, make them to enable them to work more efficiently, and to enable us to have an attractive offer in terms of recruiting staff into Merton. So but we can absolutely update by email and let you know. But we are committing with staff that we will implement the structure by September, because the reorganisation has been in the planning for quite some time and was had to be put on hold whilst we were managing the pandemic. So we are committed staff also not to leave them awaiting those final structure. Now, the second question the councillor Hans asked was around the early help. So I think there's sort of two bits to this. So one is we've absolutely been working over the whole of this period of time thinking how we support families, how our targeted early help team works. What this is suggesting under 2.11c is we are aware of the pressure that we've got on the front door and in the safeguarding teams. And so what we have done is, and the panel was updated on this, provided an additional team of social workers, which we call the bridging team, to support that. But one of the problems that we've got at the moment, which I think the report highlights, is the difficulty in recruiting agency social workers, particularly because we're in competition with other boroughs. There's a shortage of staff, and so the reason for now looking at shall we actually add some temporary staff into the targeted early help team is because actually we're not managing to recruit to all those social work vacancies with high quality staff. So we're if you like thinking about all the different options we have for providing support right across the system. So that's the reason for at this stage thinking. So it's actually in response to the fact that the supply of really good quality agency social workers is not as we would like it to be at the moment. So hopefully that answers that question. And then and in terms of the 3-year budget question, so I don't know, Nick, if you want to answer the 3-year budget question. Yeah, I will.
3-year budgets to be grappled with. 3-year budgets are in place, so we can factor in the census of pupils, so we know the pupils that are going to be forward funded by central government. We also need any school that wants to have a license deficit, that we need a minimum of 3-year rectification plan, and also as well, it helps us plan the high needs block for our children with education, health and care plans. I would say though, we received a really interesting presentation at the school standards committee from Hollymount School. Sam Burnage, who's head teacher there, who did point out some of the variances in his budget this year caused by COVID, which was the heating bills have not gone down because the windows have been open to ventilate it, as Dagmar recommended. And secondly, the water bill is really quite high because the hand washing has been encouraged in the school. So there will be quite a challenge going forward to balance this year's budget, get the first year budget away and accurate, and then plan the next 2 years as well.
But Jane, are you on, please?
I think, yes, I think I've answered all the questions I've had so far, Chair.
Okay, so I'm not sure who is answering that one then. No, this was about the budget that Omar is just talking about.
Sorry, what was the question? I missed it, Chair.
Right, you were just commenting.
Yeah, thank you. So my question.
Can I just 1 second?
Yeah.
I don't think Nick's question was fully answered or answered.
I do actually have a very short supplementary, Chair.
No, well, you can't add that.
Well, no,
just now, please.
it's on exactly the same
Okay,
question.
quickly.
It's given the fairly comprehensive answer we've had there, what kind of level of accuracy has there been on three-year budgets in the past? Speaking personally, although I'm a governor at a couple of special schools, there's been no accuracy whatsoever. They've never borne any relation to reality whatsoever. But I mean, is that reflective of the school population as a whole, or is it just a freak? Thanks.
That's probably going to be quite difficult for Nick to answer in terms of Merton school budgets, but in general, it is a really helpful, it is certainly for those schools that are going into a deficit or asking for a license deficit. It's a really helpful process in terms of thinking through some of those things, exactly as Nick outlined, about if we're expecting any changes in the pupil numbers, or if we're noticing those sorts of changes, or thinking about how they might use, for example, how they're using the school buildings and income from rentals, any changes that they're anticipating around if they're running their own after school clubs or nursery provision, or so all of those things are really helpful to look at in advance. And although there are some changes, they certainly, I would say, they bear a resemblance. They're not completely out of kilter. But Nick, in your experience elsewhere, it's
yeah, I would agree with you, Jane. And the normally 3-year budgets are very good on looking at your staff spend, because they're built-in pay rises and built-in pension contributions, and also they're normally set. And also as well, the government now produces a set of benchmark tools where every school can benchmark their budget and how much they're spending on each element of their budget over that 3-year period.
Right, thank you, Omar.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jane, for your report. My question, in parts, has already actually been answered. It's in relation to the restructure and the point that's made in supporting vulnerable children, and the challenges that recruiting interim social workers provides Merton Council, and it pending the conclusion of this restructure. If I reference 2.12 to 2.12, it says that it concluded on the 12th of May. So is that still an issue now, or is that an issue that potentially will be concluded on in September per the earlier conversation? And is there anything that the council officers can do to reduce that pressure?
Okay. Is that, yeah,
Sorry.
is that
I think you're
Jane?
muted, Jane.
Yeah, I need to unmute myself. So they're related but two slightly different things. So the restructure consultation with staff concluded on the 21st of May. Then what Sue has done, so we got quite a lot of feedback via that process, which is exactly what a consultation with staff should be about. And so actually what we're doing at this point is taking the time to go through that, to clarify with staff and think about some of the suggestions they've come forward with. And as Sue said, a lot of support generally for the structure, but some things absolutely that we want to reflect on in terms of the structure as we move forward. So it is true that there will be, once that restructure is completed and once we've implemented it, there are some posts that we will be able to go out for permanent advert for that we can't at the moment, because what we don't want to do is appoint staff and then find that actually they're then effectively going to have their job description or their grading change. So there are some posts that relates to, because as part of this the restructure, some staff will be able to apply for some promoted posts. So there will be a backfill there. So certainly once we've landed it, there are some of the permanent posts that we will be able to then fill. In terms of the agency social workers, so we've got a number of problems. A, the quality, B, the fact actually lots of boroughs are looking for agency, and also we have a memorandum of understanding across all of the London boroughs, and some of the London boroughs are not sticking to that memorandum of understanding, so they're offering higher rates for social workers, which means that we've got some social workers who will go for the higher rate of pay in another borough. So there's a number of issues there, and what we tried to outline for you in section 2.11 was all the things we're doing to try and manage those pressures to support staff, some of which are around increasing the different ways we might encourage staff to come in. So I mentioned the bridging team. One of the things we've noticed is that actually we do get that's quite a team that actually agencies workers do like to join, and it's got quite a varied breadth of work, and so we are getting good quality staff in there. So we're increasing the number of staff that are in that team as one way of encouraging people in, and we're looking at all of those sort of strategies that are outlined in 2.11 to provide support and think about how we manage cases, because some of the things that, for example, Sue has come in and is looking at is, are we closing cases in a timely way? How can we move? How can we step down some of those cases? And again, that's where both Sue and Nick would be working closely together to look at that sort of step down into our targeted early help teams or into other early help services that are outside the council.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask 3 quick points if I can. One of them came up this evening under supporting vulnerable children 2.7 when Dagmar was speaking. It says that we are formally the full decrease in face-to-face meetings with. Are they being continued? Are they being brought forward, or are they going backwards or decreasing? The second one is 2.19. I wonder if we get a bit more information on that. And the third point is 2.26, which is about the take up of 2 years, 15 and 30-hour offers. Is that going down because there are less children in the system, i.e. the birth rate is lowering? Or is it because families that have been having children at this age, are they leaving the borough, moving out of London because of the pandemic we find ourselves in? Or is there a third reason? Oh, and welcome, Director. Congratulations. Thank you, Chair.
Right, okay. Anyone else before? Okay. Councillor Henry, Joan.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, and I'd like to say thanks to everyone here tonight, and thank you for the new officers, and hope you enjoy working with us. And looking at 2.37, as we all know, all our students have been through a very difficult time, and focus on their learning, as it says here. I'm just wondering whether or not for students to really catch up on what they're missing out. I know it can be very difficult because sometimes the classrooms are very intense and very large. Are there going to be like after school classes provide for them? Are they going to be like for instance, Saturdays homework classes, so they can really catch up properly on the learning they've missed out on? And also with the virtual schools, are there going to be extra funding to bring in extra teachers to support these children for their next term exams coming up, especially, further on, maybe next year or so on? Thank you.
Any more questions? No, okay.
Okay, so Chair, I'll put Nick on standby for the question about paragraph 219 and 237 around the catch-up premium, and I'll start by answering. So in paragraph 2.7, councillor, I think that what the paragraph is saying, that as the constraints around COVID-19 have decreased, so in other words, as we've been able to have face-to-face meetings, meet children in groups, go more into schools, the face-to-face visits and meetings have increased. So there's not a decrease, those have increased, and there's been nothing at this point, which has meant that we need to go back to a different operating model. So we would continue with those face-to-face meetings and continue with those as far as possible, replacing the virtual contact arrangements. So that's an increase rather than a decrease. On paragraph 226, so there will be a number of reasons why that take-up is lower. All the reasons that you mentioned. So there are fewer children. We know there's a fewer children coming into those places, and we do know there is some movement. The other reason why we think there is less take-up is because actually during the last year or more, families have not been taking up their places, so they've been nervous about children starting in nursery, and we so therefore that has also had an impact. But because we know there's a decreasing birth rate, we are anticipating that demand across all those age groups is likely to remain lower, and so there is likely to be an oversupply of places. But it's quite difficult at this moment to see exactly what that, because of all those reasons, a number of reasons why those are not happening in the way that the take-up isn't the same as it was before. I'm going to leave Nick to answer the catch-up premium, and he may want to add to the virtual school point. So I think in terms of our virtual school for our looked after children and their work with our care experienced young people has continued right through COVID, and they continue to get a really good level of support, and we're anticipating that to be the case. But one of the things that we will be bringing back to you probably in an update in the next meeting will be that we've just had notification that the role of the virtual school head is being extended, also be providing support for children in need of help and protection. So there is additional funding being provided, and we will need to think locally how we use that and how we structure what the support we're going to offer for that extended remit. So we'll provide an update on that in the when we meet next. And then Nick, if I hand over to you for the catch up and for 219, which was the EHCP.
Thank you, Jane. Well, the reason why the figure of 20 weeks statutory for the completion of education, health and care plans dropped is because the government disapplied the legislation that we had to do it within 20 weeks because of the pandemic. And secondly, a number of our key partners, especially in health, were redeployed into different parts of the health service to as a response to the growing number of people in hospital. What has happened over the last few months is that partners have come back, the secondments and into other bits of the NHS are starting to come back to the system, and that has allowed them to do their assessments on time. That picture is improving. And those assessments are done by occupational therapy, speech and language, or community paediatricians. So at the moment, our run rate is a lot better than it has been in the past. And in 1 month, we achieved 100% of the 20-week timescale. There are still major challenges in the system, though, and we're currently working on those to improve the coordination of the assessments, but also the quality of the assessments coming into the team who compile them into an assessment that then in the end ends up as a plan. Just to follow up on catch-up, the catch-up premium goes directly to schools. So schools are left to construct their programs best for their students. It looks like small group work. It looks like tutoring and additional tutoring at the moment. It doesn't look like Saturday schools, and it doesn't look like summer schools, apart from the holiday and food summer schemes that's in play at the moment. Probably it's worth saying that several of the head teachers are reframing the catch-up because the pupils, and many of the pupils have had a different experience and may well not been aligned to the curriculum. But what the teachers are seeing, a head teacher trying to do, is capture that experience and make it an experience that's positive, as well as then fitting it into the curriculum and working out the gaps in learning, especially as those children transfer from primary to secondary school. So there's a lot of assessment going on at the moment. However, what the secondary schools are trying to do is actually carry out some kind of examination within their school and also meet the new rules and the new processes to grade students for their exams that are no longer moderated centrally or by any exam board. So at the moment, the secondary schools are really busy, and we're just trying to work with the secondary schools to identify the gaps in learning and make sure we have appropriate programs and responses in place. Thank you.
Much. May I just ask the question now? With catching up, I'm sure that's going to cost money if you need staff. The staff that we already have are working overtime as it is, or working themselves out of well-being. So is there enough funding to help with catch up from the government, please, or DFE?
The head teachers are feeding back to me that there is gaps in their budgets. So what they have to fund from September will be a response to COVID, which we believe will the government and public health advisors will still be around. And secondly, we still haven't identified the actual scale of the gaps that are present at the moment. I don't probably believe there's enough money in the system, and right off the top of my head, I can't remember how much each individual school is getting for that through catch-up premium at the moment. But I'll come back to the scrutiny committee on that number.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Okay, I think we've covered the department update and could move on now to performance monitoring report. And I think, is it Carl who is going to lead on that one, please?
Thank you, Chair. So the Scrutiny Committee will be familiar with the performance dashboard that is presented at each meeting, and it takes the form of a cover report and a dashboard. A couple of changes to the format following feedback from committee members. There is now a commentary section in the in the cover report, which enables a bit more explanation to provide context to the figures that members see in front of them. The other thing that I'd like to highlight for this meeting is a change from a red indicator in relation to the EHCP assessment timeliness, the 20-week timeliness indicator, which we've already talked about at this meeting. It is no longer listed as red, and it is now reporting as a green indicator. In addition, you will see that we are providing slightly more contextual information for for committee members to really understand or have a better understanding or insight into this particular part of practice. So we provide a monthly figure as well as a cumulative figure, so which is running along the calendar year, which is the requirement by the DfE to report an end of year figure. So I think with those small tweaks, not only are we demonstrating better performance in that area, notwithstanding some of the challenges we still have in the system, but I think we also have a much richer understanding in relation to that particular indicator. So that was one I really wanted to highlight today, but you have the dashboard and the cover report in front of you, and myself together with Nick, Sue and Jane would be happy to answer any questions you may have on the dashboard.
Thank you very much. Anyone wants to ask any question? James, okay. Anybody else? No. Anybody on the system? No. Okay, James, go ahead then.
Thank you, Chair. Well, it's the same comment that I've been making now for years, literally years. We meet 6 times a year for 2 hours or so each time, so 12 hours a year, and we continue to receive these reports full of greens. I mean, there's nothing for us to scrutinize, there's nothing for us to monitor, but I say it year after year. It's no disrespect to officers who are running this chart. It's fantastic, and there is more detail than there used to be, but 12 hours a year, Chair, and we're looking at greens all the time. And the whole point of scrutiny, we know there are reds, there have to be reds, there have to be ambers. There are reds and ambers in every borough, including Tory boroughs, so it's not a party political point. But to use our 12 hours a year to be looking at greens, I mean, I've said it for years and it just seems to get ignored. I'm not very often controversial, but I've said it for years and it gets ignored. And also, Chair, while I'm being difficult, again, we meet 6 times a year, 12 hours, and tonight, I think this is the thinnest agenda I've ever seen tonight. So there's so much going on and so little opportunity to scrutinize. Thank you.
Answer that, please. Carl. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, I was just unmuting. So the indicators are agreed by this committee. If there is appetite to revise them and look at them again, then obviously that would be something that I'd be more than happy to engage with. But it is something that's set by this committee rather than what is that we're trying to show something that isn't happening, I guess. And by the other thing I would say is, it genuinely is a good set of indicators to get a sense of what's going on across the directorate. To be perfectly honest, I think I've seen various guises of these things in my career, and they're always quite similar. But I think this does give members an idea of activity and outcomes that we are achieving.
And it probably is worth saying that lots of these are indicators that we have to report on. We're expected to report on them from a national point of view, and I know Councillor Holmes we've had the ongoing debate, haven't we, over a number of years about whether what people like to see is a sea of green or a sea of red, and obviously there are some red indicators in there, and we certainly have, as Carl outlined, the Education, Health and Care Plan indicator that previously was red and that we've been working really hard on to improve. As Carl says, that if there are other things that the panel feels that we're not reporting back on, this is something that we do have data on that we could report on, we can do that. But this is quite a comprehensive set of indicators of those that we are expected to report to our nationally to DfE and some other forums on.
Thank
Well, well, Chair, just quickly, we won't, I mean, there's no point pursuing it this evening, but for 10 years, Chair, I've really prided myself on being moderate and being supportive and positive whenever I can. But the answers, particularly from Carl, I'm sorry to say, is unhelpful. I mean, the answer of, well, it's the committee's fault, the committee chooses them, I don't think is helpful. I've gone on for years about this, as the director has acknowledged. There's a massive amount of good work going on. We know that. We're very lucky. We live in a borough that is, on the whole, doing incredibly well in these subjects, and that's thanks to the officer team this evening, and obviously the administration rightly claim credit for that good work. But this is a very simple point which was not addressed in the answers we were given, which is 12 hours a year. There is no point in looking at greens. Greens are fantastic. That's where we want to be. We want to be at greens. But as a scrutiny panel, we must be monitoring areas where there are challenge through to improvement, through to a green. I can't understand how any member of this panel could have any other view when we meet for 12 hours a year. And it's not a party political point. Every borough, every district, including Tories, have plenty of reds, but that's what we should be looking at. What is being done about this? How is it improving? What are the strategies? Seeing those strategies being implemented, seeing those improvements come through, and then seeing the greens. And at that point, we know that we've got an officer team that is progressing red through to green. But to start at green, when we have 12 hours a year, and then to say, well, the committee choose it, it's just, I just think it's very wrong, Chair, very wrong. Thank you. And I'm sounding more moderate than I feel on it, if I'm honest.
If I may, Chair, I did
Chair.
want to just come back on that. I think because Councillor Holmes makes a really important point. I think the question is what the dashboard is there to do, what purpose it fulfills. If it is there to fulfill the purpose that Councillor Holmes has just outlined, which is to highlight areas we are struggling and to see them through to their conclusion, that is very different to the dashboard that we currently have in front of us. I would wholeheartedly agree with that. The dashboard we have in front of us, it supports the departmental update. It gives the committee an overview. There's a lot of these indicators, for instance, aren't even target indicators. They give a sense of volume of and comparisons in terms of how we would be doing against other boroughs, for instance, in terms of our rate of looked after children or numbers of child protection plans and such like. That's a very different purpose. The dashboard I inherited and what I thought I was providing was exactly that, to give the committee an overview of the volume and some of the areas where we do have targets. If, however, we would want to change that dashboard and utilize it in the way that Councillor Holmes suggests, it would be much smaller, I would suggest. It would be very much targeted on areas where we are struggling, and it would be a very different use of the scrutiny committee's time. That was the basis of my comment around if this is the purpose set by the committee. And that's the point I would make back. And I'm happy either way, really, how this committee wants to do this. One thing I would say from an officer's perspective, I think it is important that the scrutiny committee has a sense of overview from the departmental update as well as in terms of the figures. Whether or not there's opportunities and ways in which we want to maybe highlight the areas where we are making improvements, that would be possibly a slightly different dashboard or an additional one. But I do actually agree with the point Councillor Holmes is making. But as I say, at the moment, my understanding is that this dashboard serves a slightly different purpose.
So, Chair, sorry to jump in, but I do want to come back. I'm very grateful to Carl for that answer. That was a very helpful and constructive answer. I have to say, and it may be my fault, but in the many years, and I would ask veterans of this panel to call me out if I'm wrong, but in the many years that I've been raising this point, I don't think anybody's given me an answer quite like that. And it is a helpful and constructive answer. So thank you very much for that, Carl. I gather you're there for me rather than there, but thank you for that. I mean, Chair, I'm in your hands and in the hands of the panel. I mean, I think Carl is absolutely right that it's important we have an overview. We must celebrate success at this panel as well. I'm absolutely in favour of that. But I just come back again to the 12 hours a year. And I think it's really important that we try to have more focus on reds. And when I've raised that in prior years, before any of this officer team were in post, that has been agreed more than once, and it never happened. So perhaps I'm happy to stop now because I've made my point perhaps more forcefully than I do normally. But Chair, can I maybe ask that you or somebody else, it doesn't have to be me, just does a little bit of work to review this once again, because Carl's answer to me this evening is very fair, but there must be a balance. He's also seen my point, and I would like it to be looked at again. It has been looked at before. It has been agreed there would be more reds by prior officer teams, and it hasn't happened. So Chair, perhaps I can leave that with you. But I've said enough for tonight, and I'm grateful to Carl for his comments.
Back to that in a minute, but I'll go to Nick first, please.
Yeah, just sort of in support of James and sort of not. I understand exactly what you're saying, and I remember with a different scrutiny panel coming in, meeting after meeting, and seeing a thing. How scared are you of crime in the borough, and that being seen as a measure, and you look at it and say, well, how is this actually measured, and what's the point of it? And in the end, James, we actually got rid of it because it was pointless. But it is, as Carl said, it is entirely in our hands. What I suggest, and Chair, knock me down in flames if you like, because I hate extra work, but a little subcommittee going through these, seeing what is valuable, what isn't valuable, and what we aren't seeing that we ought to be seeing, might actually do us a power of good. So there you are. That is supportive of sort, isn't it, James? Sorry, Chair, through you.
Thank you. Anybody else before I say anything? No? Okay. Carl, thanks very much for your report. And I understand it from both sides, what is being said, because I sit on another panel in another place where we have risk assessment things. And so we have the same colors, the traffic light system, but we have it in a sort of consecutive way. So you see how one thing's moved from another. And I don't know if that's what you really want, rather than seeing, because if you were, probably not the right analogy, but if you're outside waiting to drive along the street and it's all green, the other side is not going to be too happy when nobody else is allowed to go. So if we can see where things move from one area to another, that probably might be more beneficial to us. So I don't know if we can, I'm not thinking we need a panel to work on that. We can talk to the officers and see how that works before we move to anything else, if that's okay.
Because, Chair, we are a scrutiny panel. That's the point, isn't it?
Yeah, if I could, so I guess I'd just like to make a few points. So one is, I think it's really important that the panel is aware of the national indicators that the the directorate will be reporting on, that the council is reporting on around their services. So it is important, I think, that a lot of these indicators remain for you to oversee, even if they're green, because actually you're then seeing what we are reporting externally. Otherwise, I think you will not get that oversight of where we are, and also actually won't see if some of those indicators do then become red and become a worry. And I think there has to be something also that is the combination of the performance report and the departmental update. And hopefully one of the things we do in the departmental update is flag to you where there's a challenge, where there are things that we are finding more difficult, and what we're trying to do to address those. So I'm more than happy, absolutely, as you say, to have a look at what other things we might bring in to scrutinise, but I would caution against getting rid of this set of indicators, because what that will mean is that the panel has not got an oversight of what we are reporting externally in terms of our services.
I don't actually believe that's what they want, the panel wants, or we, to get rid of anything, but it's probably to just see the process so that it doesn't look like a lot of green, which I quite understand. Most people like a lot of green, but it has to be a transformation, which I'm sure it has gone through. And so we've got to green now. And really, I'm quite happy when I don't see a lot of reds, but if it's there, that means something's not working properly, or we need to do more work. But with everything, I think we can have a second thought and have a look to see how it works. Thank you.
And Chair, we can of course have two. We can of course. I completely agree with the director that we have to have an overview, and I also agree that that the departmental update does deal with challenges. So I agree with that. But keep in mind, Chair, that as Chair, it's presumably at your discretion to say to the officer team, could that list of indicators please go as part of the pack to members of my panel, but could this list of indicators be the one that appears on the agenda item, so that we get that flavor, we get those critical indicators, many of which are green, and it's fantastic that they are. I'm not forgetting we're talking about many successes here too, but it could be, Chair, that you say, could those indicators just simply be part of the pack, an information item? And could these other indicators be what we actually consider at the meeting? I mean, I'd have thought as Chair, you would have the discretion to say that as well. And that would give us the best of both worlds.
Please.
Thank you, Chair. I don't disagree with James in certain respects, but in 2009, 10, 11, we had two councillors who actually went through this on behalf of the scrutiny panel, and it was rearranged the way that officers and members agreed. And then, if my memory serves me, a few years later, when James was on the panel, we went through another change where one or two of our colleagues looked over this again. And on those two occasions, we agreed what was going to be there as a panel, and we've ended up with this. So basically, this is our fault if we're complaining about it, not the officers. We have agreed, and we have come to these decisions that these should be on here because they're vital. All these indicators are vital when you're looking at sort of care plans and all these other things that we have to do for our children. And as I say, we are the ones who basically have agreed this. We have gone through it with two members, and then it's come to the panel. We've agreed this. The officers have looked through it and said, yes, we'll do it this way. So, I mean, I'm not blaming any individual. It's just the way that it's evolved into this. We have to take the responsibility. If we want to change it, we've got to admit that we've got it wrong. We've got it wrong, not the officers.
I think that's fair, Chair. I would like to reflect on what I said earlier. I mean, Councillor Pearce is right. I mean, that's what I'm referring to, of course, those two rounds, both of which I remember, where I said, please, can we have more reds? That was what was agreed, and this is what we've got tonight. So perhaps Councillor Pearce is right to flag that to me, and perhaps I've been a little unfair to officers. The first time in 10 years I've got genuinely annoyed, and I've had to back down in 10 minutes. But I do feel, Chair, thanks to yourself, that I do feel there's a sense in the panel that we can potentially look for a compromise or have the best of both worlds. Thank you.
Could I just say something as well? I think mainly in support of Jane to say that these are kind of performance indicators that you would really need to know. But I totally understand what you're trying to say, that this is a scrutiny panel and we need to focus on those areas that are not so good. And we all know that there are some. And so maybe a way forward could be to keep these indicators, because they're essential things that you need to know, and are known by most councils up and down the country, but that in the second part of the meeting that we focus on a small number of themes each time, where we are open and honest that we've got some challenges, explain what the challenges are, and set some indicators and targets for ourselves that you can then scrutinise and hold us to account on as we make progress. So I've only been here for, say, 2 weeks, and I have already seen a couple of areas that I think need improving. There may not be a national indicator, but there's certainly challenges and certainly things that you should be holding us to account on. So maybe we could suggest a couple of those for you, and we could have discussions around those themes and bring our progress reports on those issues when we come back.
Thank you very much. And I
you.
think,
Yes,
in
thank
fact,
you.
that's probably what we're saying, and haven't actually said it clearly, probably. But I think this is what we need. And it looks like we don't, I'm sure we all like success, but when it starts coming up in such magnitude, you start wondering. And so we need to be able to look at the other things that need to be looked at probably a little deeper, as you've just said. So I'm sure we can do that at some point. And I don't know, we can discuss, I'll discuss among the group how we might probably collect whatever ideas they want. And then we hand it over and we can come to some consensus. Sorry. Because in the past, I have actually been too kind and say to the officers, you can go and the work program hasn't been looked at, but this is also a new work program. So now, Eleanor, I have not thought about ignoring you at all. So it's your turn. You've got the floor.
Very sorry for ever applying that you did, Chair. Thank you very much. And if you don't mind, I'll just weigh in quickly on the discussion that's just happened, because I think it's a very fair discussion, and obviously it isn't my job as cabinet member to tell Scrutiny how to do things, but just my thoughts are, yeah, there's lots of detail, as Sue was just saying, underlying these indicators where we are doing work. There are lots of other boards that aren't political scrutiny boards where this work is looked at, where we do go into lots more detail. So things like the corporate parenting board, which Hayley sits on, the Men Safeguarding Partnership that James mentioned, the Children's Trust, and there we do have often kind of really clear actions and quite granular level kind of RAG ratings where there are, you'll be pleased to know, lots of things that aren't green. So I suppose the challenge will be, as we've just been saying, how do we get that balance between that helicopter overview and that focus, and the suggestions you had of focusing in some areas might be useful. I mean, Jamie could look at the kind of departmental update report, and maybe in that, it's very comprehensive at the moment, and maybe you could actually just flag up the areas that are the kind of, amber priorities for you for that quarter or something like that. I'm very on board with that. But I would say that I think overall we are a pretty green authority. When I speak to my cabinet members in other London local boroughs, they face a lot more chaos than we face here. We're very lucky to have a well-run service and some excellent schools and excellent families and young people. Thank you for letting me weigh in on that. So firstly, in terms of my priorities, I have to first say it's Thank a Teacher Day. So on behalf of everyone, I hope you won't mind me taking this moment to thank all of our teachers and school support staff all across Merton for everything they've been doing. And secondly, let's do some thanking of officers. So it's brilliant that Jane's come on as DCS. I'm also very excited about Hannah having gone on from having been interim DCS to Chief Exec. I think it's going to be great that we've had somebody who's been so close to the Children Education Service. He's leading the council, so we're really excited about that. We sadly lost Elle Mayhew last week, so thanks for all her work, but I'm delighted to have Nick and Sue on the team, and we've already been working closely with them to work out what our amber and red issues are and what they need to focus on. In terms of my kind of priorities, I think they broadly fall into three areas. You'll be unsurprised to know that many of them have come up already, so I won't go into tremendous amounts of detail. The first one is around spaces. That's providing education places for all the pupils that we have duties for. So for special educational needs and disabilities, and for medical provision, this is about growth. So at Cabinet last night, we started the formal process on a new unit at Watley, working with Melrose School, focused on the growing number of children with autism spectrum disorder. And we also at Cabinet updated on progress in trying to find suitable accommodation for our growing medical education service. But as came through in the update report, the picture's more varied at the kind of early years and primary level, but the numbers are down. And again, back to the performance updates, I would question if whether actually the reception surplus places at being over 10% should actually maybe be amber rather than green at the moment. We can look at that because the forecast is that the birth rate is going down, has continued to go down, and so that will be a real challenge for lots of our early years providers in our primary schools. And we need to work closely with them to manage this without it harming individual schools. Falling numbers have huge impact on school budgets, which we've already highlighted are already tight. And I'm very grateful for the cross-borough and cross-party working with neighbours in Sutton to raise our concerns with the Department for Education about their proposed new free school that was going to be just a few hundred metres away from Merton. And we've been kind of lobbying to say, hang on, we don't think that's needed. We think that could have a negative impact on both Merton and secondary and Sutton schools. So providing places is one big priority. The second one is supporting children's social care. Firstly, during this period of restructure, which if I'm honest, James, I'm not surprised that you hadn't noticed it because it's kind of just been kind of lingering on, and now it's gone into kind of full pace over the past few months. But primarily supporting children's social care on the issues that have been talked about already. So the rising caseloads, the rising referrals, and how we need to support every family that needs help, but they should be appropriate to the help that they need. So this shouldn't necessarily always involve social workers, and instead focus more on the early help and family wellbeing service that we've already talked about. This is going to be a priority, but at the same time, we've got to make sure that we are addressing where there is genuine rising needs. And in the departmental update, it talks about the kind of depth of quality assurance going in to work out where it is growing need and where it is actually that we can work with those families elsewhere. Finally, a constant focus for me is addressing inequalities. At the moment, there's a big focus on addressing inequalities post-COVID, and also in response to what young people have been telling us that they're worried about in terms of gaps. So notably over the past year, there's been a focus on race equality following Black Lives Matter, and on the experience of girls in experiencing sexual abuse and harassment. And we need to listen to those young people, we need to hear their voices. And I'm really proud of the work that we're doing with our schools and with our wider youth community, looking at those issues. We've got a big race equality conference on Friday with our schools. But this is the gaps that exist between other groups. So special educational needs gap is an ongoing one that we need to worry about, and increasing our provision helps with that. And also income inequality, and the kind of catch-up work has already been mentioned. Nick pointed out that he didn't think there's enough money in the system. I would hammer that home. I don't think there is enough money for schools to do all the catch-up that they're going to need to for the pupils who have come from different backgrounds and had very different household experience over the past year to some of their wealthier peers. And I'm very excited about the holiday activities program that we've got planned over the summer. We did some great activities over the Easter, working with people like Tooting and Mitcham Club, and Polka Theatre were involved, and AFC Wimbledon. There's a whole range of providers, and there's going to be lots of activities, and they are very squarely targeted at those pupils who are from low income backgrounds and who we think have suffered particularly over the past year. That's, I think, my priorities. Thank you very much, Chair. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Ellie. I need to ask something probably. Okay, I'll let everybody else go first. Then I'll ask mine at the end. Who, James? Yeah. Anyone else? No? Okay, James.
So thank you, thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Cabinet Member for your report. When you talked at the beginning about the successes, I agree with that. We are a very lucky borough, and I do say that at every single meeting, I think, almost without fail, and probably uniquely for an opposition member. Can I ask, when you are visiting schools at the moment and talking to heads, and I appreciate your visits may be more limited than you may like, but can I ask, what are they saying to us, or to you, but to us as an authority, in terms of what may be missing? So I was also at the School Standards Committee that the Assistant Director referred to earlier in the evening, and we learnt a lot that evening, but I learnt a lot. But I'd be interested to know, in your visits and in your discussions, what are heads saying to us? Where are they feeling that more is needed? And I appreciate money will be a big part of that, but I'm also interested to know what else they may be saying. Thank you, Chair.
Anyone else? No, well, go ahead. Mel.
Yeah, I'm very sad to say that it's not many face-to-face visits. I have done a couple, but it is more kind of emails and phone calls and kind of joining group meetings. In terms of the cap, yeah, money is a big one, but money's linked to a couple of other issues, both of which I've raised already. So one is places. So some of the schools that are contacting me and lobbying me are worried about falling school roles, and that's becoming a concern for them, because they want that, as I said, kind of dealt with as a kind of cross-borough issue, not just kind of leaving individual schools to kind of fight between themselves for pupils. And another big one is special educational needs and disabilities. So the work that we have to do as a borough to get our dedicated schools grant under control is involving a lot of, will involve working very closely with schools to make sure that they can put the support in place so that pupils who can be maintained in the mainstream school are, but that comes with costs, and we need to have conversations with them about, what those cost envelopes are. And there's a lot of work that's going to be going on that in the next few months. But also, when I speak to schools at the moment, a big headache still is logistical challenges of COVID. There's arguments about whether they could or shouldn't have visitors. I think I was talking about the lockdown, that's still at the forefront of people's minds. But I'm really glad that the school improvement team have kind of kept their work going, as mentioned in the department update, to continue to offer the support and challenge to the schools that we think do need a bit of extra help, and that is continuing.
Thank you. I think James stole one of my questions, because we belong to the same panel. 2 seconds. On school panel. And really, we haven't been able to see anybody. And we've only had one meeting for well past a year. And a very interesting meeting, and it's my first ever, and it was really interesting. But I used to visit the schools, and you get a lot more when you're there face to face. Plus, I'm sure they're happy to see us as well. And I know that COVID is still there, and we had the report earlier, but I'm just wondering if something can be done so we can have it, I don't know, Zoom or some other way, because it feels so far away from everyone. And I don't know how you felt this evening, but for me, to see us in real rather than on Zoom, where some people think, are they real or were they? It would be lovely. And I want to ask another question, but I think I better let Omar speak first, because that might be a longer one.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry for the delay in taking my mask off. 21st century problems. So my question is in relation to which schools, or are we aware which schools are most affected by race and inequality, and what additional support as Cabinet member you providing to those schools?
Thank you. That's a really good challenge, because it is different in different schools, and it's different between primary and secondary, and it's different in different parts of the borough. I haven't been trying to support any individual schools. We are trying to work cross-borough to facilitate between school conversations, so that, for example, some of our schools that have more diverse intake and are kind of used to, might be more used to dealing with some of the challenging conversations, are able to share their understanding and their learning with others. I think that's as much, because I don't want to start to talk about individual schools, if that's okay, but it's a very fair question. And I think this is something that I think we should report back to you on kind of what we are doing on all the work on race equality.
Yeah, I'd be in support of that if that was reported back.
And what we can talk about, and what has, well, it's what it was in the was it last meeting we had the whole kind of school data set, and that looks at the gaps between different ethnic groups, and some of that you can get down to kind of individual school level. The problem was that we had is that it's all backward looking at the moment, because we haven't had GCSE and Key Stage 2 last year, but that is available at a school by school level.
That's very good, thanks. And yes, I think personally, and I think the group would welcome getting those marks as to how we relating to the different schools. But not only that, how do we share knowledge? Because some people have really good knowledge, but it becomes part of them and it's not being shared. Whereas we could learn so much and it could be part of this. I shouldn't be telling you what to do, but CPD, it could be done. Right, my next bit is, I'm wondering, it wasn't mentioned in these papers, but with children who have, we call it teenagers really, who've left school, they're still in education, but they don't have families. So they're now being put by us somewhere to live. How do we actually make sure that that place is suitable? And how are they maintained and kept safe? And I have my reasons for asking, but it's not for this meeting. I just want to know what we as a council do, please.
And if you have individual cases, I'm happy to take that up with officers afterwards. So, you know, if you're talking about a child who's in care, our kind of formal responsibility is to kind of house them and at 18, but we can continue to provide kind of leaving care support beyond that. We have relatively low numbers kind of leaving care each year, again, compared to some other local authorities, though we had a rise kind of recently with a large number of teenage unaccompanied asylum seekers who have often not been in the country for very long, been in our care for a short period of time and then turn 18. I'll defer to officers to go into more detail on what that looks like. But one thing that is a priority for me, if I was allowed more priorities, is making sure that we have appropriate housing for these young people. The availability of housing in this borough is tough. It's really challenging. I have in my caseworking inbox at the moment several families who would appear to me to be very high in need, but compared to other people's need, they're low, and so therefore we simply don't have enough homes for them. I think that as a borough, as corporate parents, our priority should be finding suitable accommodation for those who have been in our care, and we've got some plans underway to come up with innovative ways to kind of address that. And I know that's been talked about in previous, that's been the subject of previous scrutiny here as well, because it's an ongoing issue.
The next bit is similar to what James was talking about. It's about monitoring, because it's all right, we can put them in somewhere and then, I don't know, for want of a better term, forget them. It looks as if they don't get monitored as much as they should. And so I'm just want to know how we do that. And then we can actually, as you mentioned, RAG rate it, see how it's working.
To go into the detail of that, we need to kind of, I would pull in officers, but yeah, we've looked, you know, we have things like semi-independent accommodation, but yeah, the level of input that they're getting won't necessarily be the same as what they were getting before 18.
We'll talk about this somewhere else, but I just wanted to bring the issue in. Joan, did you want to speak?
Okay. Thank you for your report, Harry. On the same subject that Councillor Chair is on, I just want to find out, for children who are leaving, young people who are leaving care, how do you prepare, or how does, you know, the council in a whole or social worker prepare those children? And how do they, I just want to put in a way that I don't really put myself in any problem. So it's help with the foster carers. So I understand some of the difficulties. And how do you prepare the accommodation for these children to move into? Because we have young people moving into accommodation to the age of now 19, 18. And how does the accommodation prepare for them? Because in my days, we used to have a starter pack for them, like pots and pans and, you know, bed linens and everything. You just, you know, talking from what? Do they now prepare these things for these young people? And how do they monitor that these young people have these things to move into? And, you know, feeling comfortable, because it's a part of your life. It's a part of moving on into, you know, in the world. And how, you know, because personally, when I look at some of the issues and concern, I'm wondering whether or not is we put them into that situation or how they end up in that situation there and now.
I'll say something and I'll invite Jane to come in if she's happy to on some more of the details. So firstly, you talked about, your experience of being in foster care, and what we have been trying to do is encourage a kind of policy of staying put, so that if a foster care family is happy to continue to have a child who's been in care living with them after 18, we think that is often the best place for them, in the same way that any other parent doesn't kick out somebody the minute that they turn 18. I don't know about the exact practicalities of what is given to a young person that does need to be moving to their own accommodation. Yeah, I don't know if any officers want to come in, if that's okay, Chair.
Does anyone want to add to what Ellie said, please?
So I'm not exactly sure exactly what the pack is. So I would need to check that. But it sounds as if by some of the questions that are being asked here, it would be really helpful in our next update or to have a short bit that just talks about all of the things that take place for young people as they are leaving our care experienced young people, because also it'll be different depending on what the needs are for those young people. So we will have some young people that have quite intensive support, both from social workers, personal assistants, the virtual school in terms of their needs, and others who perhaps have less regular but more sort of touch base support depending on their needs. So, Chair, can I suggest that we add that in as a particular section in the update next time, give the panel more detailed information about what we are doing? Because it sounds,
sorry, thank you very much, Jane. That would be helpful, because it seems a bigger issue than we're talking about here at the moment. And it applies to people's lives. And it also affects our reputation as a council. Yeah, James wanted to add something, thanks.
Thank you. Just one comment on this debate and then another question, if that's okay, of the cabinet member. The area that we're just talking about now, of course, we have had a task group on this. So I wonder if, but I appreciate we have just had a dramatic, well, not dramatic, but significant officer turnover. But maybe if we are going to have a future report, could that address our task group report as well? And as part of that, so I keep forgetting you're there, but as part of that, if the director is happy, it would be really good to have an understanding of where we are with our task group report and the implementation of that. And Chair, my final question to the cabinet member is that I was at my school's governors meeting not that long ago, a few hours ago actually, with Councillor Draper, and the school improvement officer, the education partner for our school, was liaising with the head every month, which is really good. I mean, it's not the same as going in, but it was good to have that regular contact. So a sort of policy question for the cabinet member: have you given thought to, in the months ahead, how can we best use the school improvement team to support the recovery of our schools? And is that something that you are interested in or would be willing to look at? How can we make even better use of online support, and how can you, as a cabinet member, it's not a trick question, but it is part of it is a question for you. How can you, as cabinet member, really satisfy yourself that the excellent, fantastic school improvement team that we have is being used to the absolute best of our ability to support schools in their recovery? So it's really a policy question. Thank you, Chair.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Yes, school improvement and keeping our strong school improvement team is something that politically I'm very, very, very proud of. Again, I think we have a larger one than many other local authorities. I would say that we don't just see school improvement as the responsibility of Elizabeth and her team, though. We also have a really strong school-to-school support model where we have clusters of schools working together. And in terms of your question, I think there is a lot that can be learned from the past year in terms of virtual working and making things more efficient. And I imagine lots of these meetings will continue to be virtual, particularly for busy heads. It makes things easier. However, I would agree with Councillor Fraser that they've kind of in some circumstances, nothing beats going to a school and visiting them and seeing them. And this would be how I was allowed a kind of fifth priority on priorities. We can't be complacent. I think our schools are brilliant. We can't be complacent. Ofsted's going to start turning up again. And we've got schools who were due Ofsteds who, you know, then now it's become more due, and schools that haven't been inspected, I'd about to say Ofsteded, that's not very official, haven't been inspected for a large number of years. And again, that's going to start to come through. And I think while some Ofsted visits have been virtual, they're going to go back to face-to-face. It is going to be about our staff going into schools and getting a real sense of what they're achieving, where the strengths are, where the weaknesses are, and where they need more support. But yeah, I'm very keen that as part of the kind of wider Merton transformation project, that all of our officers are thinking about, well, what is the most efficient and effective way of doing things? Is it face-to-face or is it virtual?
I think that's probably we should leave this now, if you finish, Ellie. Thank you very much for your report and everything. We need to be looking now at the work program report. Right, just to say that although this is like a list, I did have a discussion with the officers, and Jane in particular, about changing the format and also to see how things might work together. And there's something else came out on I saw it on the computer, I didn't print it, so I don't have that copy, which is there's a table, but it's not getting rid of these, it's how they will work together. Jane, did you want to say anything about that, please? Seeing that you wrote it.
Yes. So we went through all the suggestions, and I put some suggested timings next to some of those in terms of which panel to bring it to and where some of those might be included in other larger reports that we were bringing. So would you like me just to go through those, Chair? So that the
would be lovely, please.
Yeah.
Page
Okay.
12 for those who can't find it in the.
So there was a set of suggestions. So our having looked at them, the suggestion is that the primary places is the first one that we bring as a report back to the panel on the 29th of September. That would certainly fit in with the conversations that have taken place this evening as an area that is of concern, and I guess will be helpful to Councillor Holmes in terms of his one of our amber to red areas that we're worried about, and so we'll let you know what we're doing about that. So that suggestion is that one on the 29th of September. We do the academic catch-up, bring a more detailed paper about that on the 3rd of November, and the mental health and well-being on the 12th of February. So trying to spread those out a bit. The digital technology in schools, I think the recommendation was that was a task group review. So obviously that's sort of slightly out of the specific panels in terms of my suggesting dates. School exclusions, the suggestion is that we include a more detailed section on that in the school standards report that comes to the March panel. Then and again the same with the speech and language services, so we could include that there. And there are two others, one around the apprenticeships, which actually will be an HR-led report. So I haven't suggested which panel that comes to, because obviously we'd need to liaise with HR colleagues around that. And around the EHCPs, the suggestion is that we include that in a report with the DSG, the updated DSG recovery plan. So we do a report on all of that together because they're absolutely interlinked. And so I haven't at this point suggested which panel, because we are in the process of pulling together that plan, and then we'll have a conversation with the DFE and some support and challenge around our plan. So would want to sort of bring that within that timing. So I'm not sure whether that's going to be September or November, but it's likely to be one of those. I think I'm sort of looking at Nick for it looks like it'll probably be September or November, wouldn't it? Yeah. So yeah, so we'd add into there as well, so, as we're not clear on that time scale exactly wanted to time it right so you'd get the best and most up-to-date overview of that. So those were our suggestions.
Thank you very much, Jane. What happened is, in case it sounds as if, where did this come from? We have a pre-meet, and we did have a meeting on Monday, very short meeting, half an hour, and realized that we have an election coming up soon in May. And so therefore there's 6 weeks as well, the PERDA. And so we can't be stretching this over. And what we said in the past, and I still reiterate, that we cannot start things and leave them hanging in the air. We need to finish them. So if we can't finish it, we shouldn't start it. So we needed to plan to link things, because some things link nicely together. And that's what Jane was explaining. It looks a bit strange on here, but when you get the table, then you'll see how everything fits in. I know that's just been looked at and organized, and it hasn't reached us yet, but it will come to the next meeting. Okay, so, but nothing is being taken off. I know, I noticed, James, and I'm not especially eyeing you up or anything, that when technology, digital, it looked, because it had been started before, and it won't be, that will not be ignored as if nothing happened. So that can be used to finish this off. But technology has become much more important now since COVID, especially because there's a lot of blended learning, and we're still having discussion, everybody, including the colleges and the universities, about how learning can take place without being in the classroom all the time. Not that face-to-face isn't important, it is very important, but there are other ways as well. And for me, it's very important for our young people to learn about independent learning, because once they leave secondary school, they're going to do a lot of independent learning. If you never learned that, you never manage to know where you're going, really. So all of these things are important, but they will come, they will flow. And that was the plan that Jane was just reading out. So unless you see it, it doesn't make the same amount of sense, but just to reassure you that nothing has been taken away, because we discussed this at Scrutiny and we're going to do it. So does anybody have anything to add to that? No? And if not, yes, oh,
Quick
James,
question.
yeah?
So just,
Okay,
Chair, sorry,
okay.
just a quick question. I'm very sorry that I missed this meeting. It's the first one I missed, and I'm not quite sure how I managed to, but I apologise. The meeting this was set. But what Jane, what the director's just been through, that is the proposed agenda for the year, is it? I mean, that seems to me to be an excellent, a really excellent agenda. And the Chair, the bit I didn't fully understand is the digital technology in the classroom. Are we saying that will be a task group that gets completed, or are we saying it will be an agenda item during the year at this panel? I wasn't sure which you meant.
Check that with Jane, but I think what we meant was it's a task group, it had been started, and we need to pick up whatever was done then, so that we don't just do things, leave them, and then, or restart things.
I mean,
And so
yeah.
a task group to look at those things and how they work and the rest of it. We haven't gone through the depth of it yet.
Okay. I mean, I would advocate that given work was done, I would advocate, but I mean, it's our decision, it's your decision and our decision rather than officers, I think. But I would advocate that it is completed as a task group. I mean, I would imagine that, I don't know whether Stella has a view, but I would imagine 3 meetings could complete that work. If it's decided by this panel that it is taken as an agenda item rather than as the completion of a task group, okay, I'd prefer it was a task group, but okay. But can I ask officers to make sure that that preliminary work was captured, and perhaps those of us on that task group could have the opportunity by email to contribute to ideas to the eventual report. I'd rather it was the first, but if it was the second, hopefully there would be an opportunity for those of us who are on the task group to make a contribution before it came to this panel.
Okay, what you're saying is what we've been thinking, but we didn't think digital needed to go to, well, I didn't either think, because the effect on people, children, adults, teachers, everybody, mental and health and well-being affects everything else. So until we can actually focus on that and see where we're going, digital won't even be able to be thought about, because everybody is thinking of how they're coping. And so that's why digital wasn't at the top. We had to make it look like a seamless run through of everything.
Chair, I think it was at the topic workshop, I think it was exactly as you outlined, as Councillor Holmes has suggested. The idea was that this was a task group that was partway through, and that the opportunity for that task group to finish its piece of work was the third option, rather than it being a paper that came, would be that task group finished its work and reported back to the panel.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for clarifying. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Stella, did you want to say something?
I was just going to sort of clarify in the same way that Jane did. It was my understanding that it would be a reconvened task group. And so with the panel's agreement, I'll email members to ask who wants to join.
Thank you, and apologies again that I missed that meeting.
Is happy. Thank you very much. And I can now know that I'm not going to say it wrong when I say safe journey home. And because you're not in your home tonight. So try not to sleep here. Thanks to everybody, and especially our new staff, member of staff. You're really welcome. And Merton is a lovely place to work. And we appreciate all of what you're doing, everyone. And thank you. Have a